Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today this is going to be a Battlegrounds related video, and this time around we're going to be talking about Battlegrounds deck, and more specifically I'm going to be showcasing my Battlegrounds deck that I'm using for victory track meta, which is basically what I used to in order to get to Gladiator Circuit. Currently, I believe last I checked in the morning I was second in the world. I'm still second actually, that's quite neat. So this is slightly different because there are a handful of champions that work extremely well in victory track, but they do not work in Gladiator Circuit for week 1 meta, and that is to do with some of the new nodes. But basically this is almost, well, we're going to be showing my exact victory track meta deck, and I'm going to be explaining the choices that I made there in order to hopefully help some of you understand, you know, the things that are working, things that aren't working. And one of the things that you will definitely notice quite immediately is going to be that I'm not running quite few of the champions that a lot of people are buzzing for on defense and or even on offense in cases, but mainly a lot of the defenders. And obviously I fully understand and expect the comments about, you know, not everybody has a roster like that and stuff like that, and I completely understand that. But it is one of those things where obviously, you know, you need to make the best you can. You need to make do with what you can the best, in which case it often will mean going back down to your 5-star champions or trying to replace some of the choices, which is also the reason why I'm going to try and explain why these champions are here and what are the bigger issues in these metas. But you are going to quite quickly notice that, for instance, even though I have ranked up most of these champions, you know, I'm not running my Penny Parker or Captain America Sam Wilson, who is a very good defender in this meta. I'm not running my Civil Warrior, who is a very good defender in this meta. I am not running Colossus, and I completely stand by those choices because yes, they will occasionally win you matches, but it's just quite rare to find those situations if you're going up against competent opponents. For instance, if you draft Colossus as your 6th or 7th champion late on and I haven't drafted already a counter for him, yeah, you know, you might trap me with the Colossus, for instance. But at the same time, whenever you draft Colossus early, then there are plenty of very, very quick options that I will be able to find throughout my deck, and I'm going to be able to nuke down that Colossus. And running a large amount of one-dimensional champions in any deck, in any of the metas, is always quite risky. And that is also often how you end up with imbalanced drafts. So you do, in my personal opinion, as often as possible, want to make sure that majority of your champions in your decks can be dropped on defense and used as attackers. So one of the first things here I definitely want to point out: do not get carried away in, you know, adding all of these, you know, armor up heavy champions, stuff like that, because obviously the entire meta is designed for players to try and counter those armor ups. And yeah, sometimes, you know, Super Skrull is going to get you the W, sometimes Soul Warrior is going to get you the W, but again, in my personal experience, when I saw them in my deck, I most of the case kind of skipped past them, because I'm always worried if I draft a Silver Warrior, if opponent gets a perfect counter, then they're going to nuke him down in seconds. I'd much rather pick something like Sasquatch, where even with the great counter, my opponents will take time killing him, so on and so forth. So, and same thing goes for attackers. Like CGR, for instance, can work in this meta, but I'm not running him because I just don't think he works well enough against the biggest problem champions for this power burn meta. And before we get to the overall explanation of every champion in my deck, it is important that we identify the problems in this meta, the real problems, the toughest champions to counter. And first champion to point out is definitely going to be Nimrod, especially in Gladiator Circuit meta, but also in victory track meta, because when he's armor broken, he doesn't lose his armor up. And on top of that, he starts with an armor up. So there are very, very few champions in the game that do well, or like very well against Nimrod, especially in Gladiator Circuit. But even for victory track, he is one of the more capable defenders. And there are not that many great answers to him. In a similar case, we have Thing, because Thing is naturally immune to Nullify and Armor Break, and only real thing you can do against him is use ability accuracy reduction champions. So you always want to pay attention to whether you have at least like 3-4 Thing counters in your deck, which again I will explain as I go through the champions in the rest of my list. Mephisto is also extremely dangerous in this meta, but obviously Rintra, there are only like 3 or 4 champions that can take down a Rintra with these nodes. Again, very important champion to always try and counter for. And then we can still take a look at Sasquatch as well, and obviously Domino. All of these champions have very, very limited amount of counters for, which is why some of more kind of peculiar champion choices are in the deck here. And that's how we're going to break it down. So Dr. Doom obviously worked quite well with the nodes, with the meta. He works not as great in Gladiator Circuit, but in Victory Track, whilst you can still Nullify, he works just about fine. Only champions really that you need to worry about are the Nullify immune ones and also the ones that start with armor ups, but other than that, it's great. Tigra works basically fantastic as an attacker. Any champion or most of the champions that do not start with armor ups, you can do with Tigra now, especially after the bug fix. Now we have Nimrod, which is there for 2 reasons. Number 1, to kill dominos, and I suppose a struggling Toad or Weapon X as well, but you don't see those too often. But primarily as a great domino draft deterrent to begin with. But second is obviously he is one of the best defenders. Again, you can armor break him, but he doesn't really care about it because he doesn't lose his armor up when armor broken. He starts with armor up, and then he's also quite chunky. And the fights, you know, there aren't too many great options, as I mentioned, against this guy. Now, Valkyrie is arguably one of the best champions for this meta. Quick piece of advice here, trick for using Valkyrie is you should land a handful of medium light mediums or medium medium combos initially against most of the opponents in order to help you build up some extra power and get to that level 2 quicker. And if you have appropriately ranked up Valkyrie, then you will likely be able to finish off the fight quickly after that level 2 in most cases. Now, Mr. Fantastic can serve as a decent defender, but he is one of those science champions that can function as an offensive option too. You can just about take down a Rintra, but you can also take down majority of other Mystic champions who aren't quite as chunky. And the playstyle there is quite straightforward. You just use heavy exclusively, use level 1 when you are close to 2 bars of power, build up to your level 2 to double off on your debuffs, and then the fight kind of goes underway. Nick Fury, again, just purely defender. Thing is, again, one of those danger champions that you do need to look for specific counters whenever Thing does appear. Galen is one of the counters for Thing, but he's virtually always banned. I ban him all the time because I don't want my opponents to have access to him. In this meta, Kingpin can do Thing, not that great though, but you can use Namor to deal with Thing, and you also do have Falcon here in my deck to deal with Thing, as well as Valkyrie. Then we have Warlock, an absolute double threat. He is capable of taking down Rintra. You do need to be very precise in using Warlock. You want to make sure that you always activate your level 2 as your 11th hit, and then it works out perfectly. So it is largely parry heavy, then parry triple hits and a level 2. Mephisto obviously is always defender, but he can work offensively against some lower health pool opponents if you are aggressive enough. Then we have Anti-Venom, again one of the very few science champions that works due to the stagger on his heavy attack. You want to always make sure that you drop your heavy attack latest as 7th hit on the Hit Me I Dare You node, but once you get used to it, it works quite well. Domino in this meta is exclusive defender, one that has very, very, very few counters that work properly in this meta. And obviously we do all know now about Howard the Duck. You can still get away with using Nimrod and Archangel, who is also most of the time banned. And to have an additional domino counter, I'm also running Hulkbuster, because Hulkbuster can do that fight just about well enough. Another kind of off-the-cuff not standard counter could be Mordo, but if you are in a pinch, you can also get away with using OG Thor or Diablo for this fight in particular. Now, Korg actually can function as an attacker because he does have armor break on his heavy attacks, so if need be, in a pinch, you can get away with using Korg and get decent results offensively against some squishier champions in case. Then we have Human Torch, who still works decently well. My strategy with Human Torch is to build up to 5-7 smolders, then use up my 10 hits, wait 30 seconds, build up more smolders meanwhile, and then try and finish the fight off with my second set of 10 hits. Now, Rintrah works as one of the best defenders, and again, it's important to know your Rintrah counters. For me, in my deck, that would be Mr. Fantastic, that would be Valkyrie, that would be Anti-Venom, and that would be Warlock that can do this fight, again with parry heavy method primarily. And then on top of that, Hulkbuster can work decently well against Rintrah. I nearly killed one and remained with nearly full health. And then I also run additionally Diablo, pretty much specifically for Rintrah. He can come in handy for some other fights, but he is one of the better Rintrah counters in this meta. You do need to know what you're doing and how to play around things, but he does function just about fine against Rintrah here as well. Then we have Juggernaut, just a generic offensive tank. He works for Victory Track meta. He does not work for Gladiator Circuit meta, just like Dr. Doom, because of the nullify. I mean, you can kind of get away with staggers, but I find it just too messy and not quite worth it, so I'm not running Juggernaut in Gladiator Circuit, but for Victory Track, he can be absolutely amazing. Archangel as well, always crazy against virtually everything that he can do. Then we have Galen, that's pretty much perma-banned. Kingpin, the strategy with Kingpin is to parry heavy 3-4 times and then drop your level 1, and then basically keep spamming your level 1s, be as aggressive as you can. Make sure that when you attack, you basically always having the degen up, and as often as you can weave in your heavy attacks, just because it does more damage per hit. And now after the node fix, he does function better. Namor is kind of like a multi-purpose get out of the trouble card, and Namor is also one of the reasons why I'm not too keen on running a ton of armor up heavy attackers, because he absolutely nukes Captain America, Sam Wilson, Civil Warrior, Colossus, and all of the champions of similar nature that start with a ton of armor ups. So Sig 200 Namor is important. It's not important for him to be a 6-star or a 5-star. Most important thing is Sig 200. He also functions perfectly fine against Korgs and Nick Furies and some other random matchups. Now we have Hulkling, another champion that's been virtually banned in every match. Null is a great dual-purpose champion, offensively and defensively, ideally as high Sig as possible. Then we have Sasquatch. Can be used defensively with his staggers, but obviously primarily a defender and one of the tankier ones. King Groot is completely power burn immune. He's one of the very few answers to Nimrod that people typically main alongside Null as well. And then obviously King Groot is still a decently good defender as well. But yeah, he can work on offense. OG Thor is one of the very few kind of like a bit out there attackers them running, and that's pretty much only armor break based exclusively offensive champions them running. You could run CGR. I find it easier and quicker to use OG Thor in this meta. I do think he works for slightly few matchups, and personally, you know, for me he has done better. But again, you will notice that I'm not running a ton of champions that are exclusively offensively based with a ton of armor breaks, because most of these champions do have a way to work around these nodes. And if you think about it, the entire meta is about kind of countering the armor breaks, especially with Mystic class. And therefore, using armor break reliant champions often just doesn't quite work out. For instance, you know, if opponent drops a Colossus, then only tech champions can armor break him. Or if opponent has Sasquatch or Man-Thing and Rintrah and so on and so forth, then most of the armor break champions just don't work. So OG Thor is there primarily to, you know, nuke down something that is either of the tech class like Howard the Duck, Hulkbuster, Sam Wilson, or random Penny Parker, or just kind of like Warlock as well as something that we often face, or Nick Fury is quite common. And yeah, with OG Thor, it's one of those things where he's there because I think he's pretty much the most effective, easy access armor break champion with high output damage. Not really running many other armor break super reliant kind of like exclusively offensive champions. Now we have Longshot, great for offense and defense as well, obviously, because we do have quite a lot of cosmic champions floating around. As a mystic, you can throw him on defense as well, feed that mystic dispersion, especially if he's awakened. Works quite decently well against other mystics, which is the main reason why I'm still running. Like, you can get away with using Longshot against Man-Thing, for instance. You can get away with using Longshot in few other kind of like a bit more scuffy random situations. But also definitely as a defender. Then we have Man-Thing, again primarily as a defender, can kind of be used offensively too if in a pinch. And then we have Hulkbuster, offensive, defensive, and primarily there as an extra counter for Domino. Falcon, 90% in the deck because he counters the Thing and does it well, and can be used against some other random opponents in a pinch, like I have taken down Colossus, which is not a perfect matchup, but can be done. Again, Diablo is there specifically for Rintra for most part. And then we have Howard the Duck as an offensive and defensive champion. So this is the deck that I have been using for Victory Track. If you guys want to show, if you guys want me to show you, I can show you my Gladiator Circuit deck. And there are a few changes. I have taken out Dr. Doom. I have taken out Diablo. I have taken out Longshot. So basically I took out the Nullify reliant champions on that. And then I added in a few more choice characters, like Massacre can function quite well. Mojo works quite well for defense and offense in this meta as well, because extra armor up feeds his Mystic Dispersion, and he can make that armor up on every 10 hits expire quite quickly. Plus many champions are quite buff heavy in this meta. I'm also running Mangog because he can work as a defender, but also offensively he does have access to staggers and armor breaks. Armor breaks on his heavy attack can come in handy for sure. And those are kind of like the main changes. As I said, I kind of got away with most of the nullified champions. I added Wiccan back in because Wiccan can work against Korg and the Thing. But basically, you kind of had to make some substitutions there. I'm not saying this deck's perfect. I'm not saying that everybody will be able to build a deck similar to it. But what I am saying is that it's extremely important to isolate these kind of like problem characters and make sure that you have multiple counters to each. And with that, obviously, you need to keep in mind Domino, you need to keep in mind Rintra, you need to keep in mind Sasquatch, you need to keep in mind Thing and Nimrod. Those will be kind of like the 5 biggest problem defenders, I would say, that you will find in majority of the decks against majority of the people. And, you know, there's just no way around it. You need to try and find answers to those champions. So, I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you guys are still in the Victory Track trying to get to Gladiator Circuit, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to try and answer them the best I can. See you in a few minutes. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the